we're going to dive into one of those exact moments, the Great Indian Rebellion of 1857. All right, so picture this. It's the afternoon of May 10th, 1857, in the military town of Meerut. Things that had been simmering among the Indian soldiers, the sepoys, just suddenly boiled over. And this wasn't some quiet protest. No way. It was a violent, sudden uprising against their British officers. Okay, so how on earth did a spark like that catch fire so incredibly fast? Let's actually break down what happened in those first few chaotic hours. Now, this wasn't just random mayhem. The sepoys had very clear targets. First thing they did, they seized the armory, the bell of arms, to get their hands on all the weapons. Then they went after the symbols of British power, government buildings, the jail, the post office. And this next part is absolutely crucial. They cut the telegraph line to Delhi. That move right there prevented the British from calling for help. This was a calculated strategic attack. And this is the moment everything changes. It's where a local mutiny starts to become something so much bigger. Under the cover of night, a group of these rebel sepoys gets on their horses and starts riding for the old imperial capital, Delhi. They're on a mission to find a leader and a symbol for their cause.
So we've got the what. We've seen what happened. But the real question, the big one, is why? I mean, a revolt on this scale doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It needs fuel. So let's take a look at the grievances that had been building up for years.
And if you want to know the immediate trigger, well, you just have to listen to these sepoys themselves. This quote says it all. The British had just introduced new rifle cartridges that were rumored to be greased with cow and pig fat. Now, for Hindu and Muslim soldiers, biting those cartridges was a massive violation of their religious beliefs. It was an insult they just could not let slide. But look, those cartridges, they were really just the final straw. The fuel for this fire ran so much deeper. The British land revenue system, for example, was seen as totally oppressive. The taxes were so high, they were pushing tons of people into poverty. And on top of all that, the British had recently just annexed huge territories like Oudh, which created this enormous resentment. They had basically alienated the entire population. Okay, so the rebels have momentum, they're heading for Delhi, but what they really need is to turn this uprising into a legitimate movement. And to do that, they needed a figurehead, a powerful symbol of the old order they wanted to restore. Meet Bahadur Shah Zafar. Now this guy was the last of the great Mughal emperors. Well, in name only, really. By 1857, his power was pretty much just symbolic. He was an 82-year-old poet, basically living under house arrest in the Red Fort on a British pension. His quiet life was about to be completely turned upside down. So imagine the scene. The sepoys from Meerut show up at the Red Fort, and they don't exactly follow proper court etiquette. No, they swarm the gates, demanding to see the emperor. They tell him, look, we've killed the English over these cartridges, and now we need you to lead us. Now, this is so important. The old emperor, surrounded and with basically no other choice, gave them his blessing. That one single act was a complete game changer. It gave the whole revolt legitimacy. Suddenly, this wasn't just a bunch of angry soldiers anymore. This was now a full-blown rebellion being fought in the name of the Mughal emperor, uniting Hindus and Muslims under one single banner. So with Delhi captured and the emperor's blessing secured, bam! The news just explodes. It spreads like wildfire. What started as a spark in Meerut now had a capital city and a cause, and that little inferno started to rage across all of northern India. Just look at how fast this all happened. The speed is staggering. It starts on May 10th in Meerut. By the 12th, Delhi has already fallen to the rebels. Then, in the weeks that follow, it's just a domino effect. As the news travels from one town to the next, one military base after another rises in revolt. The entire Gangetic Plain was literally ablaze. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just a military thing. The leadership that popped up was incredibly diverse. Out in the countryside, you had local leaders like Shah Mal getting villagers all fired up about the tax system. You had religious figures like Maulvi Ahmadullah Shah inspiring people to fight for their faith. And of course, you had displaced rulers like Nana Sahib and the legendary Rani Lakshmibai, who saw a chance to win back everything they had lost. Now, the British were, to put it mildly, caught completely off guard. But their response when it finally came was massive, and it was brutal. This led to a really fierce debate inside the British government itself. What do we do with the rebels once we defeat them? Yeah, this image is tough to look at, but it tells you everything you need to know about the British response. This is a place called Secundrabad in Lucknow. Over 2,000 rebels were killed right here. And get this, the source material tells us their skeletons were just left scattered across the grounds for months. A chilling, brutal warning to anyone else who even thought about rebelling.
But while all that was happening on the ground, back in Britain, a totally different conversation was going on. The Governor General, a guy named Canning, suggested that maybe showing some mercy or clemency might be a smarter long-term strategy to win back loyalty. But the British public, oh, they wanted revenge. This cartoon from the magazine Punch basically shows Canning as this soft-hearted fool protecting a blood-soaked sepoy. He was widely mocked for even suggesting leniency.
So you've got these two totally opposite ideas clashing, right? On one side, you have the public, who were being fed all these sensationalist stories and were demanding blood and vengeance. But on the other, you have Canning, the man on the ground taking a more practical view. He's arguing that just punishing everyone is only going to create more enemies and make India impossible to govern down the road. The rebellion was eventually crushed. But, the story never really ends there. The way an event is remembered is often just as important as the event itself. So, how has 1857 lived on in our muggery? For over a century, the British narrative was the one that dominated. It painted the rebels as just a bunch of savage, mutinous traitors. But drawings like this, they give us a totally different perspective. They capture the humanity, the fierce determination, and the absolute defiance in the faces of the men who fought. Over in India, the story of 1857 became something else entirely. It was told and retold, and it became a foundational story of resistance against colonial rule. People like Rani Lakshmibai, the warrior queen, were transformed into legendary national heroes, symbols of courage and sacrifice for a cause that would, one day, lead to independence. And that brings us right back to the big question, the one that historians still argue about today. Was this whole thing just a mutiny of some unhappy soldiers over one specific issue? Or when you look at how many people got involved, the diverse leadership, the goal of kicking out foreign rule, was this actually India's first war for independence? It's definitely something to think about.